Hi, this is Amedeo Beretta and this is another animation feedback. This time round we are looking at previous work. So let's play through it a couple of times before we start. And yes, so the project improved from the previous iteration. There are a couple of things that are still not convincing to me. The character movement forward seems a bit erratic. It feels at times that the character is slowing down and accelerating again. And the new layout makes it a lot easier, I think, to troubleshoot. And in fact, if you think of it, at around frame 17 or so, you see that the root is sort of lagging behind the camera, while earlier on it was just moving with the camera. So there's right there you have probably a problem. Your root is stopping and there is no apparent reason. There's nothing wrong with roots slowing down and accelerating, of course, but it needs to be motivated in the scene, and in this scene it doesn't seem to be that kind of motivation there. If this was meant to be a pose before the jump, then this pose needs to be a lot clearer. It needs to be visible from the camera a lot better. The silhouette in some poses, like in this one, is a bit confused. It's not very clear, and the poses of the, let's call them the clothes of the dinosaurs, the dinosaur are still a bit confusing. It still looks very unnatural. Now I don't know if the problem is the dinosaur rig itself. So now I'm going to open the scene and have a look at it. For the standpoint of the jump, in the area of animation, which is here on the rock, is actually quite cool. I especially like this movement of the leg in here, and the fact that when the dinosaur lifts the leg, the weight moves to the opposite leg, which is very believable. So that part is really good in my opinion. This jump is strange because you have the jump moving up and right between 124 and 125, so it goes up this way, and then next thing you know it goes to the left. There is no reason for that to happen, and it's unlikely that the audience will buy into it. So that's a bit strange. The way the big pole comes down from the sky is a lot nicer, a lot more cared for than it used to be earlier on, but now it feels still a bit soft. So maybe we can have a look into it. So we have this leg to fix, the slowdowns on the approach towards the rock, and something about the jump on the rock. Now I will open up Maya. And in Maya, the motion will look a lot clearer to troubleshoot from the top view if the top view had some texture on the floor instead of just pure white. So let's put the texture there. Should make for easier reading. This way we understand how fast the camera is going, and we can see that the character keeps changing pace between each step if compared to the movement of the camera. So we already know there's a problem there. So how do we solve that problem there? We grab the master. We find out the first frame and the last frame, say, of the jump in here. Let's say the first frame of the jump, say 35, and we'll reduce the timeline there. And then we're going to check which channel is controlling the movement forward. And we'll go into the graph editor. I suspect it's Z. I think it is. If you look at Z, you see that your Z is moving at a certain speed, then slowing down, then accelerating it again, and so forth. Now this is not my scene, so I will proceed in my own way, but my suggestion in this case is usually to just clean this curve, to just delete the keys and have the animation progress naturally. This is going to change, of course. It's going to affect the steps, the position of the legs, but if you think of it now, if you compare this kind of motion the character has on the movement forward, it's a lot more natural than this motion was. A lot more natural, in fact. If we go to the perspective, to the shot camera, which we want to lock, you see that now the movement of the body actually is a lot cleaner, and the head motion looks really strange. The head motion looks strange because it's possible that you started cleaning the head motion before fixing the body. So the rule is start from the body and walk your way up towards the head. Tails, ears and stuff like that go last. It doesn't make much sense to clean the legs too much if your body isn't in the right place or doesn't have the right speed. So now that we clean the body, I also want to check perhaps what the head is doing in terms of translation. So we'll grab all controllers from the head. I have a problem every time, it is a common problem, every time I move the timeline you see that I have to move the camera. So what I can do is I can select the root, and I can make a camera that follows the translation of the root. So that now I can check this translation in the context of the head, or the head in the context of this translation rather. So in here, I think the translation forward is a bit too excessive at times. This one here is possible. Maybe I can try and identify the channel, so Z, and the rotation is crazy, and the rotation is also Z, so translate Z, rotate Z. So for now I will grab the rotate Z of all the controls, and you see that in here you have one curve with a fairly natural motion but then locks, so you are bound to encounter a glitch in the animation when you get to this point. Another curve which locks, starts, locks, starts, locks, starts, locks again, starts, locks. And then lock, movement, lock. With a set of curves like this one, it's possible your animation will work, of course. And if it works and you do great animation this way, well, keep doing you, it works. But in this case, it seems to me that your animation is not under control, or rather, it could be under much better control. So my first attempt will be to delete the curves altogether and see what happens there. And what we lose in here is we lose the movement forward and backward of the character, right? But the head motion is a lot cleaner now. And if we look at it from the camera shot, now the animation is also a lot cleaner. The head turn is a bit underwhelming. I think it's a bit dry. There doesn't seem to be any anticipation there. Doesn't seem to be any follow through there, and it seems a bit linear, as if the arcs weren't cared for. Perhaps I can take care of it. Any other rotation seems to be neglected, which is a bit strange perhaps, especially considering you're rotating the head there. So I'm not quite sure why is that. But anyhow, so the head turn, I will fix only the second head turn, just to give you an example on how I would fix that thing. So I will go into the perspective there. I'm just assuming that I fixed the body. Okay, I just showed you how to clean it. Now you would want to add some back and forth with the body, just a tiny bit, but you would want it to be there probably. So now the head rotation, I would expect, for instance, that the head wasn't moving one-to-one with the body as in here. So for instance, actually before even fixing the head rotation, I would have expected, I would put this head on a layer, I would have expected that as the body goes down in here, this being a bit like a chicken, I will also put the top control of the spine, this being a bit like a chicken, the head would have stayed up, right? It would have been stable. So body goes down, head stays more or less up in there. By the way, the space switch in here with the rotate lock to set to world, it's probably a good choice. So now the head stays more or less up, and as the body goes up again, I would expect the head to keep its position more or less. There you go, so that it's a lot more stable there. Then again in here you're going down, but it doesn't really make sense that you go down one-to-one with the body there. There you go. We stay up a little, and as we go up, we won't be going up one-to-one, but we will be a bit delayed, and then perhaps we can go up a tiny bit afterwards, right? Something like this, and with the head in here, something like this, and then again over and over again. Now I'm a bit concerned about the up and down motion of this route, and you see that the up and down motion is erratic as well. You have some very nice up and down motion, and then all of a sudden you have an acceleration, deceleration there, which don't seem to be motivated. If the up and down was taking, say, 4 frames earlier on, then the up, so the down takes 4 frames and the up takes 3 frames, the next down 4, and why the next up takes 2 frames for instance, and why the following one takes 1 frame only, the following down takes 1 frame only. So in these cases it's always a much better idea to build at least a little very basic crude loop of animation before going in there and animate the whole thing manually. After all, this is animation that repeats itself, and you see that just by doing that, the movement of my character is a lot cleaner now. I think a lot more in control than it used to be just a few clicks ago, which is a great thing to have, I think. Now this head here that I was tweaking, I'm going to zero it out maybe before the turn. I'm using animation layers here, of course. And one thing that is very useful in this kind of animations is the overlap. So let's say that your head is being dragged down by the body. Well, certainly the tip of the nose might be the last one to come down, especially if the character is not turning. I mean, if the character is not actively looking somewhere else, then the head is just reacting to the motion of the body. So as the head goes down, the tip of the nose goes up a tiny bit. And then as the character hits rock bottom here, so to speak, then the head will not immediately go up one-to-one nose and back of the head, but the front of the head will stay down, and then it will lift up earlier on. And that's how things tend to work really in real life. And if you're doing creature animation, this is really important to have, because it gives the character that kind of life that the character wouldn't have with regular 3D animation, let's say. There's a place for animation with very little overlap, of course, but in creature animation you have a lot of masses to account for as you animate, so you cannot just ignore the overlap. So in here, for instance, I mean, and plus this is a dinosaur, it's probably going to be very, very heavy, so you cannot afford to live without overlap. So as the head goes down, the tip of the nose should go up. And in here I can maybe lower the head a tiny bit. And there I think I really need a bit of help from the other controls. I will zero, usually when I don't know what I'm doing, I zero out the rig controls that I'm using just to see if that's a deformation issue or if it's the positioning of the control that makes it very hard to manage something. So now the head is delayed on the way up, delayed on the way down, and then as it turns, we can also take advantage of the turn to do some overlap. And when we recover from the turn, it would be great if we were looking a bit more forward there. Maybe if we had a bit of a nicer curve with the body. Also, which tells me that when we turn, we could perhaps rotate the body a tiny bit. I'm not going to do it on this layer, but I'm going to do it on another layer just to show you. Normally this is stuff I would plan in blocking, okay? Now in here, I'm heavily using layers, mainly because this is someone else's animation, and I still want to keep that animation there. In general, if the chest were rotating, say, to camera left in this case, you would want the back to rotate a bit of the opposite way to prevent the character from falling over to camera left. There you go. So now this is the pose of the character there. I think I can rotate the root even more. So this was before and after. You see the character is participating a bit more in the turn now. If you look at the body there, you can even compensate that rotation with the hip a tiny bit, or even with this guy with the root if you want it. Not going to go that far, but you could. So that sorts the turn, and now when we are going to turn back, we are going to have the ability to go back with this turn of the body, right? So we can set a key on the layer, on all controls of course, and then as we turn back, we zero out that layer and the character will start moving forward. So now as we rotate back, the body is also going to straighten, and I'm going to keep that straightening going, so that pose is going to stay there until we go down into anticipation, where I want to zero out the pose again to go back to what you originally intended to have in there. For the head, you see that now the rotation of the head on the way back is a lot softer. It's still pretty hard, okay? It's not as nice as it should be, but if you compare it to earlier on it was just a linear transition left to right. Now there's a bit of an arc in there, okay? Which is still pretty rough. It could be a bit slower. I'm not going to polish it. I'm just again pointing the direction here. Now in here, in terms of up and downs, it's a bit strange for me to see that a character is flying off the ground before having the leg kicking it off, right? So this pose with the left foot leaving the ground, it's way too early. You wouldn't really have it, and I think it's a common problem of the loop. Or actually no, at the beginning of the loop you actually have the kickoff. This one in here is the kickoff, so that's fine, but then you suddenly don't have it anymore. See in here, I don't know why you don't have it anymore, but really this would need a kickoff. And similarly in here you would definitely need a kickoff there, so this pose probably will stay the same, and you see it works a lot better. And then maybe you can lift off and move forward and do whatever you need it to do there. So you're missing some very essential poses for locomotion there. That's why it looks a bit strange. And also, as you push towards a kickoff, let's say that we had the contact in here. If I grab the root, I would expect after the contact to have a bit of a down there. And then as we push towards the kickoff, that's when we can go back up, right? And that looks a lot more natural again. And then, I mean, in here, again, I'm not going to clean this thing. I'm just going to show you the principle. For the jump on the way down, I will put everything on a layer just to show the principle again. And I think what I want to do in there is perhaps I can see the head raising there as we go towards the jump. I think that's a good idea, except maybe we can keep the head stable as we raise it, so it keeps pointing in the same direction. And then as we go down, I think it's also a good idea that we have the upper side of the body delayed. Maybe I can delay it even more and rely a bit less on the translation of the chest and a bit more on the rotation of the spine in there. This is a bit too much now. And then you cannot really do this kind of motion in just one frame, I think, with such a big character, such a heavy character there. So I think this frame you have at 36 is probably a bit too much. So I'm going to keep 35 and delete anything between 36 and 38 as far as body is concerned. And similarly, I'm going to delete 39. I think the transition is just too big before 38 and 39, between 38 and 39. So now we go down. I think this rotation is a bit too much. I think there might be an offending key somewhere between 33 and 34, or 44 and 35 on the root. Let's check. There you go. On the base, let's see if there is if I'm correct there, or if I'm just making it up. So you see, you just have rotation in one frame. You really need to know if this is what you want and if this is necessary. I don't think it's necessary to have a one frame transition in here. In fact, I wouldn't even know why that thing is there if you asked me. So, and you saw, I mean, before deleting these keys, you could see that there was a sudden change in orientation between 34 and 35. I want to see if this is the offender, and you see this is the offender. So the problem is that by introducing frame by frame animation, you are introducing the problem there that you might not be accurate enough to support that. Sometimes you have to go in and do frame by frame animation. There isn't much you can do very often. Well, very often, sometimes. But you should avoid that until the very end, okay? You should use frame by frame animation only where nothing else worked. At that stage, you go frame by frame. So in here, since I don't know what goes on in here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to delete frame 34, and you see the dramatic change that this makes to the animation now already. And now the way the character straightens up is a lot more natural there. And it was just that one keyframe that was making the huge problem that we were experiencing. Then as we go down, I want to maybe go down, and it would be great to know if the weight is on one leg or the other there. I think in here you're missing a kickoff. I would expect the right leg to kick off before jumping. So at 40 I would expect the right leg to be still down. And maybe with some foot roll there you can achieve a nicer pose, which means that the pelvis maybe could be helping out. I don't care about the tail. The tail is something you can do automatically with an overlap earlier on, so I'm not even going to look at it. You can cheat, you can translate the hip to help a little bit, and that will give you a much nicer kickoff there. Except now you will need another kickoff with the left foot. So you need to you would need to leave both feet a bit longer on the ground. In here I'm just going to simulate somehow half the way through a kickoff and already a lift off, something like this. There you go. I think this motion in just 1, 2, 3 frames towards the next contact is a bit too extreme. I think you can give the next contact with the right foot at least 1 frame longer to land and to extend forward. And then I was saying, because we were here for another reason, remember, I was saying we can maybe, as the body goes down, the head stays stabilized, it's delayed, it doesn't go down 1-to-1 with the pelvis, and so does the chest. See that the hip goes down a lot faster than the chest and the rest. And then as we jump up, maybe we could see if it's possible. It's not a given that it's possible, and I would need to see some, I don't know, an emu. You know, those little ostrich-like animals were little, they're pretty big, I think, in fact. I wanted to see them jump in a reference before I could really take this decision, okay? So in here, I don't really know if this is the right way to do it. I would need to look to check some reference. I haven't seen any reference from you, so I don't know if that's some research that you have performed. So the head goes down last. Probably I can even delay the rotation of the head a bit more. Even in here, I think there might be some key down there that is interfering. And then as the character jumps up, the tip of the head is being pushed down, the nose is being pushed down. And I think I want the chest, I want the arc to be a reversed arc in here. I want this, let's see if I can have it, just a second. If I can have this area arc this way up, like I drew in a previous feedback, I don't remember which one. I want to see if that's a possibility. It's not really, I don't know the rig well enough to say this is a clear possibility, but I want to try and see if that works. I think that could work, and then I probably need to zero out at a certain point after I'm on the rock there. There you go. Now I want to check the result in here. And the animation, yeah, I think it's a lot more natural, both in terms of run and jump. We could stay down on the jump a lot longer, say 2 or 3 frames longer. The jump right now is a bit strange. If I look at this leg, there is no reason really for the left leg to kick back. Why would you do that? I mean, it doesn't really need to be a reason there to kick back. If anything, it shouldn't. So I will try to keep the leg there a bit longer and simulate a lift-off pose there. That means that the pelvis in here would probably have been rotated this way and this way to favor the lifting off leg, which means also that this key is not needed anymore. And then, as I was saying, there's no need to kick back. If anything, you should move forward. So I will delete both 42 and 43 there. And in here I will zero out whichever foot roll is there, and I will definitely delay the rotation of the foot there. I'll keep it back. Now I'm not checking the deformations too much, okay? In here I'm just showing the way that I would clean this animation. I'm not really interested in fine-tuning it because this is going to be a very long process anyway. I don't want this to become a super long video in which I go through the basics of controlling deformations. This is something that you're familiar with anyway. And in here, all these feet, as the foot goes up, you would really want them to rotate to the back, if possible, by even grabbing their individual controls this way. Yes, I need the selection set there, but you need to do this kind of stuff, otherwise they will look super stiff, which you don't want to have. There you go, that's the way it should be rotated, if anyway. There you go. And there you go. Now I'm going to look at it from the camera point of view. Please notice that I first try to fix the thing in 3D so that it's clean, and only then I go into the camera and I check the result. And you see how the animation is a lot smoother there. It's a lot cleaner, in fact, than the original animation, which seemed to be very jittery in terms of motion. So, and this was achieved in just, if you think of it, in just a few minutes, just by deciding to clean the 3D motion there. Now that changes of course the position of the legs, because now that the body is cleaned, now the legs have a different position. But hey, that's the way it is. The body you should be sure the core of your character before doing anything else, in my opinion, before cleaning up anything else. But it's not really the end of the world, because what you can do in there is you can grab your feet. So I will grab the left foot for instance, and what I can do on a layer, set a key on the kickoff pose, this one, and then set a key on the contact, which is probably this one. Now we'll just move the contact a bit closer to the body there, and probably I'll rotate it a bit, because I don't really like super straightforward contacts. They don't really look realistic to me. Then the foot will stay there. In here you need a kickoff, so I'm just going to keep the foot a bit longer on the floor there. And then for the next pose, which is probably around here, I will zero out the layer. So I'll stay on the floor, this, and then I will zero out to the next contact, and I will find again another position which is not too stretched, like this one. I'm going to stay there until after the next kickoff, and then I'm going to zero out if need be. And you see in here, when I zero out, I'm a bit too far away from the body, so I'm going to make it a bit closer, and again rotate as I requested in the previous feedback, remember. There you go. So it's going to stay there, and after we kicked off for this next jump, I'm going to zero out the pose on a layer. So the animation for that foot is cleaned up, well, it's replaced, you see, in just a few minutes using animation layers. You can do the same with the right foot there. You see that now that we've cleaned the body, the right foot is landing in an outlandish place. So what I want to do is find the last kickoff, set a key on a layer, find the contact, move the contact a lot closer to the character and a lot more under its weight so that it doesn't fall down. There you go. I'm going to keep it there. This is really a strange pose until the kickoff, and then I'm going to find the next contact, which is this one, and I'm going to zero out. And then I'm going to reposition it so that it's not stretched over. You see the character is falling to camera left, so I'm going to recenter the weight a tiny bit. And here it's a bit strange that the character is kicking off. I don't know why your character is kicking off after a kickoff pose. It should be moving forward if anything, but I think down there's a deeper story in the base animation layer, something we don't understand quite that well. There you go, there you go. It's a bit of a limping action right now, but I don't want to solve every single problem in this. The important thing, because most of them are very tiny polishing issues, we don't even need to discuss them that much, but I'm just solving the bulk of this problem. So I'm going to zero out for the next jump. And now if you think of it, the jump works a lot better. Well, the run works a lot better. Let's have a look. There you go, it's working again. And it's all very clean and it looks a lot better. I don't even want to check the tail. The tail is done with the overlapper in animation like this one. Now the last jump is also an area which is a bit complicated in my opinion right now. I really need to merge these layers down, so I'm going to use Smart Bake to merge them down. And for the jump, I find it really strange that you can jump that much to the left in just one frame without even pushing. I mean, yeah, I wish I could do those kind of jumps in real life, of course, because that would be awesome. But I don't think this would play well with an audience, so I think you're not selling it too well in here. So what I want to do in there is again focus on that area of the timeline, and let's say this is let's see what happens in here. Okay, so let's say this looks like an anticipation there, so I will keep the anticipation going, and then as a jumping pose I will use 1, 2, 6. So until 1, 2, 3 I'm fine, but then these two poses I don't know what they are, so I will delete them. And I think for the anticipation I can probably even go a lot lower there, so that the character, now you see, is making an effort to go down and load something, and then as it will jump, the main motion at the beginning will probably be vertical or diagonal rather. In fact, I guess I could even push a bit more to the camera right. Yep. And then you have this sudden motion. Well, this is my key really. And then what happens there? And then we land, which is okay, I suppose. I think at the top we can benefit from a bit of a moving hold on the way up, so we stay up a tiny bit longer, and then to give us a stronger sense of weight we land a bit lower. You see that now the jump is a lot more realistic. If you compare, I mean, there's still a lot more work to do, okay, don't get me wrong, but it's a lot more realistic. If you compare the jump with this one, where we don't really feel the push of the jump or anything, we just see a glitch there. It's a lot more palatable now. So I think at least there's a feeling that somebody's doing the job of lowering and then pushing and so forth. I think this foot in particular lifts off a bit too early and could afford to stay there a while longer, even if it's just one frame. Probably just a second. Well, I'm just going to duplicate the pose and call it a day. There you go. And then I'm going to, on this pose, I'm going to roll as much as I can. If I can do whatever, like banking and so forth. And I would expect that the pelvis would be rotated this way to favor, and even, you know, even rotate it and translate it to favor the extension of the leg there. Now this is a bit too much. So this key I don't need anymore. And that will give me, it's a bit of an odd pose, but that will give me a bit more grounding for the feet. I don't know what the foot in here is doing. I don't know how I can rotate this way. It's a bit strange to look at. If anything, I think you would still, well, this leg is all over the place because the pull vectors are probably a bit messy there. So I guess this pull vector here, yes. So in here, the basic anatomy of the character is misplaced. So this is just an anatomical issue. It's not really animation. So you need your character to look like it could work in real life if you want that to look like it could work in animation. If the character has broken limbs, like in this case, then you are really going to experience troubles as you spline this thing, or even just selling this thing to an audience. So in here, I'm going to rotate this thing this way. I mean, even this looks a bit like a fork. Even this pose would need some love. This whole part in here is a bit strange. The foot roll shouldn't be high, should be probably zeroed out. And in general, I feel like there is a bit more than just a posing problem here. There's a posing problem for sure, but I think there's a bit more than that. I think you need to repose this character because it doesn't seem like you went through some methodic thinking here. And then I'll give it a couple of frames to transition. There you go. So now I'm going to look at this pose. Is again all over the place because the pull vector of the knee is really in a strange position, and I don't think maybe we could still look at the leg in there. And you see, the pose looks already a lot better with the silhouette of the leg present in the scene. I think this whole spine is a bit broken, to be honest. I would need to have a look at it from the perspective. But yes, I mean, it's not even that bad, to be honest. It's better than I expected. But earlier on, it really looked a bit strange. So I think it looks better with the leg out. So that should give a couple of reasons for this jump to work a bit better. But there's still more that you can do in there. Like, for instance, delay the head a bit more. Even on the way, when the body moves on the way up. Or particularly so, I would say, since this action is led by the hip moving up, then perhaps we could afford to even rotate the root down in there and have the hip take control of the jump, so that the hip moves down, then the bottom part of the body moves, the top part of the body moves down, and then as we fly down, top part of the body recovers, and I think that would look a lot more flexible already. Obviously, I mean, this is just the principle. It needs to be cleaned, of course. And the head, again, on the way up, I would probably... In here there are probably some keys on the base animation layers which are problematic. I would probably want to lower the head a tiny bit. This pose isn't really great, is it? And then the head will come up again and so forth. There you go. So that sorts the jump out a bit better. It feels like it's jumping there. There's still love to be given there. Now let's have a look at this pole coming down. So the note in here was, let's come down with a straight leg and then let's bend it. But in here you see you're coming down with a diagonal leg already, and then that means that later on when you bend it, it doesn't quite feel like there's weight on it. It feels more like there's someone leaning back there. So I wonder, I mean, maybe again this is not a solvable problem, but hey, I will try to solve it nevertheless. So I will find the root of this character, which is this one, and as the leg comes back down, yeah, you see it doesn't quite make sense for the body to move back, and you see how, well, even just by looking at the movement of a leg, the feeling was that the character was leaning back, and then we go into 3D and the character is leaning back there. So it's a bit, you have to, even if the character is not visible on screen, you really need to, at least, you don't need to animate it, but you need to make it so that the character is positioned in a coherent way off screen. Also, the weight of the character would not go down until contact has been made. So now, as we go down to the contact, the leg is a lot straighter, and then it bends. And now it looks like there's someone up there. Yes, see that? Now, of course, there's a lot more work to do because this guy then will bounce back up a little bit and so forth. Yeah, something like that. But that was the principle I was trying to highlight in my previous feedback session. Now, as far as the contact itself is concerned, this is the paw in there, and I think you can afford to just dig it in a lot more into the rock, this pose. Oh wait, I need a, before doing that, set a key and set a key on 160. So I lower down 159, there you go. So the feeling will be a lot stronger. And then what I was mentioning in the previous feedback is that these toes will be pretty big and heavy. Where are the controls for these toes? So it seems that the only control you have is this one. You can only rotate the index as a single piece, unless I'm wrong, of course. So I mean, that means that this rig does not have the resolution that the action you're trying to make it do requires, because in here you would really want the toes to wobble and the various phalanxes to wobble as well independently from one another. But if you cannot do it, it means this rig doesn't have the resolution that you need. So you shouldn't be using this in the first place, in my opinion, because it's going to undermine your whole animation if you do that. Anyhow, I think one thing that you could do anyway is, as you go back up with, this is the index, let's say, you can afford to stay up a bit longer and to spread a bit less, and then to fall down maybe in a couple of frames, and then you could even bounce back a little, bounce down a little. That's a bit too much, but it would really require, in my opinion, the toes to have individual controls there, because I don't think you can really sell this shot in here, but it's already a lot better in my opinion. Now, the finger poses with this raptor here, let's see if we can do anything about those. Ooh, that doesn't look promising. Well, look at this to begin with. I mean, if the pose doesn't work already anatomically, then again, that's going to be not much fun. I mean, this is the way the finger is supposed to be, and so that's already not helping you. I don't know exactly what's going on in this rig. I don't think the rig is very detailed in here, and I think the proportions are not really helpful. So in here, I think my first attempt would be to, and I see there's no way you can achieve a nice pose with these guys. I mean, you just don't have enough control in here. So I think maybe a nicer way to control these guys would be perhaps to go into the rig and unlock some channels. Now the rig in here, you forgot to reference the rig, so this is very risky because I could easily break the whole animation without even noticing and lose it forever. But I could try and unlock the controls channels and see if I can, for instance, scale them maybe, which I can't, but there's a scale 1 connection there. You see, I can scale the controller there if I break that connection. So sometimes, especially hands rigs, they may be very limited in 3D, and all you can do really at that stage is to manually position them so that they give you a nicer pose. Sometimes you can do better things than others, but you should really try your best to make this stuff look believable, because the problem is that whoever will look at your animation won't be thinking, oh yes, you know what, probably the fingers here suck because the rig was really bad. People looking may just think, well, this person maybe didn't check the fingers. It's easier to think that than to think that the rig sucked. If you're lucky, whoever watched this animation knows about this rig, but you need to be very lucky for the audience to know that. So you see that even just by scaling down that finger, I get a lot of a nicer pose there. So I think that's a course of action that you could keep there. So that's it. I hope it helps. It was pretty long, but at least I went through all the process that I could employ, that you could employ to clean up this animation, all of the considerations that you could put into it. Now you always have to remind that if you want to do creature animation is all about finessing and anatomical believability. If we go into the 3D pose and your character has broken joints to begin with, then that's not a good start. I mean, you're going to suffer a lot before this animation looks nice as it should be. Also, creature animation requires some detail in the rig. So if you're trying to animate a rig like this one and you want to give the impression that this rig is a super big character, you will need a lot more controls over there. You will need to have more controls, and it's possible, again, since you didn't reference the rig in here, which is dangerous practice, it's possible that in here there are some joints that you could animate, and that those will give you individual controls. So, you know, I mean, you wouldn't want to animate directly on joints, but hey, if all you need is this shot done this way, then big, let's break the rig and let's use the joints. Whatever really brings the rig home, okay? It's important because you want your animation to look at its best. You want it to look believable, because this animation makes the difference between you working in creature animation, where you probably want to work, and not working there. So make sure that this animation is cleaned thoroughly, and it's, as you see, it's not very difficult to give it a first pass. For instance, you just need to concentrate and focus on that. And you need to be aware of the issues, of course, but now probably you are. So have fun.